Now I'd like to start today's video here by sharing a personal story, a story that I have never told anybody. So here I am sharing it for the first time on the internet, of all places. Anyway, this story, we go back to the glorious days of early 2016 when the world was a considerably better place. Obama was still president, Britain was still in the European Union, and yeah, the world would go wonky at the end of this year, and it's even more wonky now. But at the start of the year, it was still a pretty decent place to be. And at that point, I was about 18, I think I was, and I was working in a part-time job in a shop at the railway station. Now back then, I was a pretty quiet, canny soul, and in the station where I worked, there was a girl.
A girl?
A girl?
Who worked there as well, who I really fancied. And bear with me here, there's a reason I am telling you this story. Now unfortunately, I never actually had the courage to go and talk to her, so I never did. But every time after each shift, I would go home and I would be very frustrated with myself. And to sort of get that frustration out, I would listen to the song we're going to talk about today. Because to me, this perfectly encapsulated how I was feeling at the time about this girl. I did actually even consider sending the girl this song, even though I'd never spoke to her. In my head, that would have been a romantic thing to do. In reality though, it would have been a pretty creepy thing to do, I will admit that. So whenever I got near this girl, the games began to drag me down, but it was alright because I'd make her maybe next time around. Except I didn't, I never did. I eventually left that job and then I never seen her again, and I've never spoke about it until now. This is the first time I've ever said it out loud. It's always just been in my head, eh? So yeah, I never did tell her, never spoke to her. Now don't worry, there's no need to get the violins out or anything like that because I did get over her eventually, and since then there have been plenty of other girls who I have spoken to, who I have been with. At the minute though, I am single, alright girls, and I still do find myself sometimes struggling to talk to girls, and I find that this song that we are talking about today still encapsulates how I feel, this idea that there's so many things that I want to say, but when I get near them I just can't find the words to say. Stuff like, you know, sometimes I wish I knew you well, then I could speak my mind and tell you. So yeah, there's a little story for you about me and this song. Anyway, enough rambling on about me and girls I fancied in the past. Welcome back to Revolver In-Depth, and this is episode 12, I Want to Tell You. So here we are then folks with our third and final Harry song of Revolver. Of all the Beatles albums, with the exception of the White Album, because that's a double album, this album actually has the most George Harrison songs on it. He has 3 on this album. And how did he get 3? Well, I'm not entirely sure. See, there's 2 ways you can look at this. You could say, well, George's 3 songs on this album are all very good, and that's very true. Maybe Lennon and McCartney seen these 3 songs and thought, they're very good, we'll put them out there. There's the other way of looking at this, which I don't know this for certain, but I would imagine this is probably the more likely way it went. Lennon and McCartney didn't have enough songs themselves to fill this album. Now, I spoke about in the video for She Said, that it's tradition in the 1960s that albums had to put out 14 songs. It was just the way the industry worked. It was 14 songs per album. So I mentioned in the She Said video that they'd actually only had recorded 13 songs. At the last minute they had to record She Said to make up the numbers. So it's pretty clear that Lennon and McCartney probably didn't have enough songs at this point, based on the fact they had to, at the last minute, record an extra song. So perhaps that's how George has ended up with an extra song on this album. But regardless, it doesn't matter because he's got 3 songs on here and it's 3 brilliant songs. And the one we're talking about here today, I Want to Tell You, in my opinion, is the best of the 3. So anyway, Harrison began writing this song in early 1966 in an unusually long free period of time for the Beatles. Now, as I mentioned in previous videos, particularly the video for I'm Only Sleeping, if you want to hear more about why this happened. But to summarise, basically the Beatles were meant to be making a 3rd feature-length film at the start of 1966. It didn't come off and it got scrapped, so they ended up with all this extra free time. So during this period, George would become quite prolific in his songwriting and would develop as a writer because of this extra free time he now had. So like I say, during this period, Harrison was starting to grow as a writer, largely spurred on by his growing fondness for Indian culture as well as his experimentation with LSD. According to Harrison in his autobiography, I Me Mine, I Want to Tell You addresses the avalanche of thoughts that are so hard to write down or say or transmit. So Harrison's increased awareness brought on by LSD did play a huge part in these new thoughts he was having. And he'd later comment that at this point he felt like he was an astronaut on the moon looking back at Earth with his increased awareness and detachment from the rest of society. Now in the original lyrics for this song, Harrison was a lot more direct and personal compared to the more philosophical nature of the complete song. Now in its complete form, this song, you can actually interpret it as a boy-girl love song, which to be honest is how I've always interpreted it. I think it's a really good love song, this song. But yeah, apparently what he was actually trying to do was write a more philosophical song about the thoughts he was having in this period. Because of his increased awareness brought on by LSD, but you can also interpret it as a love song. So the Beatles began work on I Want to Tell You at Abbey Road Studios, or EMI Studios as it was known then, on June 2nd of 1966. Now the same thing happened here as what had happened with Love You Too. Harrison didn't actually have a title for this song. For a lot of the songs he wrote in this period, he had a tendency to bring them into the studio to work on them, but he didn't have a title for them. He's openly admitted he wasn't very good at coming up with titles. So for the duration of this first session at least, this song was referred to as Laxton Superb, which is a type of apple. Love You Too was originally called Granny Smith, that was its working title in the studio, so they seem to like to call George songs after apples in this period. Anyway, to begin with here, naturally the band focused on getting the basic track nailed down. For this, Harrison played lead guitar, McCartney played piano, Lennon played tambourine and Starr played drums, all of which were recorded together on track 1 of the 4-track tape. So the band managed to complete this song in 5 takes and they would deem take 3 to be the best one. However, if you want to hear any outtakes from this session, well, good news, you can, it's only a brief one. But take 4 has been released on 2022 Super Deluxe edition of Revolver. I'll be honest, the actual take itself isn't that interesting. The more interesting part is the speech. Before the song, you can hear the Beatles discussing the name of this song, and they're all kind of teasing, including Ringo as well is also teasing George about the fact that this song doesn't have a title. And George is sort of just taking it in good humour. So yeah, that's quite interesting to hear. I imagine it's because they're teasing him, that's why it got put on. Because the actual outtake itself, it's only a brief one, it breaks down halfway through, and it's just an instrumental. But yeah, like I say, if you want to hear it, you can go and hear it on the Super Deluxe edition of Revolver. So anyway, with take 3 now selected as the master, the band would begin applying overdubs to it. So firstly, Harrison recorded his lead vocal for the song onto track 2 of the 4-track tape. Then Lennon and McCartney recorded their backing vocals onto track 3. And then the final track, track 4, was filled with more piano, tambourine and maracas. So that was now all 4 tracks of the tape filled up, but the band hadn't finished applying overdubs, so in true Revolver fashion they needed to create a reduction mix. So that would be done here, and this mix would combine the 2 vocal tracks onto one track, and the 2 instrumentation tracks also onto the other track, and therefore it left tracks 3 and tracks 4 free for the band to continue applying overdubs to. Now it's also worth pointing out here that confusingly they actually numbered this reduction mix take 4. Technically it should be take 6 because take 4 already did exist from the basic tracks, but there's 2 take 4s of this song. The one that is on the box set is the original take 4, it's not the reduction mix version. Yeah, why they did this, I don't know. So anyway, this session would now end with all 4 members of the band overdubbing hand claps onto track 3 of the reduction mix. So the second and final session for the song would take place the following day on June 3rd of 1966. At some point during this session, the name of the song changed from Laxton Superb to I Don't Know after Harrison was asked for the name of the song and he responded with that phrase. Now there was actually only one overdub that was left needing to be done, McCartney's bass, which would be overdubbed onto track 4 of the tape. Now this overdub here was actually the first time ever where McCartney's bass got its own dedicated track on the tape. Normally the bass was part of the basic track, or if it was an overdub, it was overdubbed along with another instrument, so you didn't actually have its own standalone track where you could isolate the bass on its own. This was the first time where McCartney did this, and from the next album onwards, so Sgt. Pepper onwards, he would do this with every single song. McCartney had a tendency with later day Beatles songs of always putting the bass on the song last. It was never part of the basic track, it would be the very last thing he would overdub onto the song. This was the first time he ever did it on this song, and going forward after this he would basically do it all the time. So anyway, with the bass now overdubbed onto the track, that was the song completed, so all that needed to be done was a mix created. So at the end of this session the band would create 4 mono mixes of the song, and the first mono mix was deemed the best one, so that would be the one that would go onto the album. Now at some point after the end of this session and the release of the album, Harrison did finally commit to the title of the song, I Want to Tell You. Revolver was released on August 5th of 1966, and I Want to Tell You was sequenced as the 12th track overall on the album. It was also the 5th song on side 2 of the album and the 3rd and final George Harrison penned song on the album. So when Harrison went on a tour of Japan in 1991 with Eric Clapton, he would actually play this song live, and it would be the opening song of his set, which is quite an interesting song that arguably not one of George Harrison's most famous songs was what he decided to open his set with. That was his only tour he ever did really, except the 74 tour. He only ever did 2 tours in his life, and arguably the better tour. He opened with this song, which is very interesting. I wanna tell you, this probably won't come as a surprise to anyone, but I absolutely love this song. Of George's 3 songs on the album, this is, in my opinion, his best one. I absolutely love this song. To be honest, it's probably my third favourite song on the album. It's only topped by And Your Bird Can Sing and For No One. But after those two songs, I'd probably then pick this song as my next favourite. It's a really good song. And I love the way it starts as well, with just George's guitar riff. Ding, 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 ding. That riff, it's a real good riff. But it starts quite quiet and it builds up, it gets louder and louder. And then Ringo's drums come in, which is pretty cool. And then McCartney comes in on the piano and the bass, which again just elevates the song to another level. Now, speaking of McCartney's piano, it kind of drives this song in unison with Harrison's guitar. Now, I know in later years, Harrison was pretty critical of Lennon and McCartney and the input they made to his songs and the attention they gave his songs. And he's justified in what he was saying, but he always seemed to give McCartney, I feel, a harder time than he did Lennon. But to me, looking in from the outside, McCartney always contributed a hell of a lot more to Harrison songs than Lennon ever did. I mean, look at songs like Something, Here Comes the Sun, Old Brown Shoe, While My Guitar Gently Weeps. McCartney makes huge contributions to those songs. Arguably, some of his contributions make those songs. Whereas Lennon on them songs is either not on them or he does the bare minimum. Same thing with this song here, I Want to Tell You. McCartney is giving out a fantastic bass line, brilliant piano, and all Lennon's doing is playing the tambourine and doing some hand claps. I mean, he's not exactly doing much. And yet it was all, I mean, he did obviously give Lennon a hard time as well, but it was always McCartney he gave a harder time. I think it's because they clashed more, and I think maybe Harrison enjoyed working on Lennon's songs more than he did working on McCartney's songs. Plus McCartney was more a perfectionist, he would push Harrison's buttons more probably than Lennon would. But he did still always give McCartney a harder time, I feel, despite the fact McCartney arguably contributed a lot more to George Harrison songs than John Lennon ever did. But anyway, the point I'm trying to make here is the music of this song is absolutely fantastic. I mean, there's a reason why George decided to open his 1991 tour with it. It's a shame it was only a very brief tour of Japan, that. But it's a fantastic song and it works really well. I mean, Taxman is a brilliant opening track, but this would also probably have worked quite well as the opener because of the way that riff builds at the start. Yeah, it's a fantastic song. And the lyrics as well, they are fantastic. Lyrics like, sometimes I wish I knew you well, then I could speak my mind and tell you, maybe you'd understand. I want to tell you, my head is filled with things to say. When you're here, all those words seem to disappear. I mean, I know George said later on that this was supposed to be a philosophical song, but I never knew that until I did this video. I always just assumed it was supposed to be a love song because that's how it comes across. And it's a bloody good love song, I would argue too. So as I said in the previous two videos in this series focusing on the other two Harry songs on this album, it was becoming increasingly clear to people at this point that the Beatles did have a third great songwriter in their ranks. Arguably at this point he wasn't quite yet at the level of Lennon and McCartney, but compared to where he'd started with Don't Bother Me in 1963, he was certainly developing as a songwriter. I mean, even this album, George's 3 songs on this album, compared to what he'd done on the previous album, Rubber Soul, I mean, it's a night and day difference, really. George had really come on as a songwriter by this point, and he would obviously get to by 1968, 1969, his level of songwriting was on the same level as Lennon and McCartney. So as I mentioned in the intro for this video, this song has always meant a lot to me personally. I have a lot of personal meaning around this song, and I know George, as I mentioned a few times, says it's more a philosophical song, but to me it's a love song, and this idea of you want to tell someone you really like them, but you just haven't got the courage to do so. In your head, you know exactly what you want to say, but you can't articulate the words. I know George had the image, the reputation of being the quiet Beatle, and he didn't really like that image, but this song, the lyrics kind of play into that image a little bit. The idea of George being the quiet one, and he wants to say things, but he can't get the words out. I don't think George was particularly a shy person, it's just he got overshadowed by Lennon and McCartney. So yeah, anyway, I'm rambling on here. So this song, I Want to Tell You, it is one of the highlights of Revolver. Of George's 3 songs on this album, for me, this is his best one. It's got a great riff, it's got great piano on it. Overall, it's an absolutely fantastic song. It's peak George, well, it's not quite peak George Harrison, but it is George Harrison entering his peak. And yeah, I would go as far as to say this song is absolutely fantastic. Well, that concludes another episode of Revolver In-Depth, folks. Once again, thank you very much for watching. I'll make the joke. If you've enjoyed this, do what Paul's doing here. Give it a thumbs up. Paul would approve. Leave a comment as well. Do you like this song? Do you think this is George's best song on Revolver? Do you think one of the other 2 songs are better? Does this song mean anything to you? All that jazz. Subscribe as well if you're not already subscribed. That would mean a great deal to me. It makes me very happy. And I'll tell you all the things in my head that I want to say if you subscribe. There's also a playlist on my channel called Revolver In-Depth, which consists of all previous episodes in this series, and there's not many left now, but the future episodes will also be added. to that playlist. Anyway, join me next time here on Revolver In-Depth, where we're going to take a ride, but I can't guarantee what we'll find there. Till then though, do take care.